Hey, Legal Rebels, this is Tom Martin. I'm the founder of LawDroid, and this is my podcast, LawDroid Manifesto, where I interview legal innovators about how they do what they do. In this episode, I interview Richard Granat, CEO of LawMediaLabs, whose visionary work as a true pioneer in legal technology has been democratizing access to justice for over 3 decades, from creating the first automated legal forms website to building platforms that help solo and small firms compete with industry giants. Welcome to the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. I'm your host, Tom Martin, and I'm really thrilled today to have Richard Granat on my show. He has been a real hero to me, someone that I've looked up to, who's inspired me to do what I do, and I know probably a lot of you out there. He is the CEO of LawMediaLabs. He is also the managing partner of Granat Legal Services and has led the way in using artificial intelligence and document automation and conditional logic and all of those things that we love to deliver services more quickly, more efficiently, better. And he's done it before pretty much everyone. So I'm really thrilled to have him on the show. Richard, if you can just tell us a little bit about what you're up to now.
Well, at this point, I'm kind of winding down from a long career, and I still run LawMediaLabs, which is an incubator for some startups. We have an interest in One Digital Labs and FedArb and a couple of other small companies. And I still maintain, I have an active business, even though I'm a little bit older, of providing automated legal forms through several distributors, as well as an older technology. If you go into an Office Max or a Home Depot and see an end cap with legal forms, all that is our content through a partner. So now I kind of live on the royalties generated through thousands of these outlets. I didn't know I was going to get into this kind of more backward technology, but it's still there and it's still very successful. And my current challenge is learning more about AI and how it applies, because a lot of what I've done before related to what I call productized legal services, where we replace the work of a lawyer with software. And that kind of roots back to very early in my career, where I always wanted to make money when I sleep, which helped me with what I call my work-life balance, because even though I worked hard, the money would come in. It wasn't related to hourly billing. I kind of got away from very early on the lawyer's idea about hourly billing, and I actually moved away from the strict practice of law very early in my career to move into this concept of creating what I call a productized legal service. In fact, for a while, I ran a blog to help people think about how to turn a legal service into what I call a software product.
And some of that work was direct law, right? Where you
So what Direct Law was initially a platform which we created so that solos and small firms could compete with LegalZoom. So it was the first instance where it was a client-facing website where clients could get into their own portal, which was unusual at the time because all the data was in the cloud. And then we embedded a document automation solution so that law firms could actually automate the whole process of creating documents. And we created, for every state-specific automated legal document a platform, and with a payment solution. So clients could actually pay online and replicate many of the other functions that LegalZoom was actually doing. And initially, it was actually very successful. And I have to tell you, it was one of these things that when I do these startups, you never know how they're going to actually work out. They're kind of a mystery in my mind. Sometimes you have to be lucky. And what happened with Direct Law, we had a huge increase, but the lawyers didn't really understand that they had to do marketing to get traffic to their site. They thought it was going to be automatic, like a quick fix. So after a period of time, the volume actually declined. Now we got started at the same time that that other companies got underway to put data in the cloud. But our solution was always client facing, whereas other cloud-based solutions were financial and accounting and case management, which were back office solutions. So those companies actually did quite well. So the direct law still exists today. I actually sold it off, and it's surviving. And other cloud-based companies have now moved to this concept of a client-facing solution where clients can have their own portal. At the time, it was very how can I say it? It was so new that all the bar association was skeptical about putting data in the cloud. We had to actually issue guidelines to the Legal Cloud Computing Association, which we created with a bunch of companies to get acceptance of this concept. Today, everything is about putting data in the cloud. And it's only been like a 10-year period. It's not a relatively short period from the beginning when we started direct law, which was 2009. And now it's at 2025, but there's been obviously a dramatic change. When I started, all data was kept on-prem. So that's the story there.
Yeah, and I think it's a fantastic story because that really lit up, I think, every lawyer who at least had an open-mindedness to it, lit up their mindset as to what was possible.
That's right. That's right. And we still have a dedicated law firm clientele, but I should mention that the kind of the barrier to real growth, like Clio had a different growth path because they had back office solutions. Now Clio offers what we call, they've adopted a lot of the concepts that we actually pioneered on. But the law firms, the lawyers required too much behavioral change to be able to think about fixed pricing, lower pricing, access to a lower price clientele. They were still fixated with the idea of an hourly rate of $200 an hour, which is obviously an obstacle to innovation and access to the legal system for people who can't afford it. I mean, the legal profession still works primarily with an upper middle class clientele, whereas my commitment has always been to try and give access to the legal system for everyone. I don't think you have a viable legal system unless everybody can access it in some ways. So our strategy there was a fixed price concept. We pioneered limited legal services, the whole idea of limited legal services. And we were offering a divorce forms with no fault divorce for like, $200 or something like that. So that also reflected all of our legal form sites. You started with direct law, but before we had direct law, we had mylawyer.com 10 years before, which we started in like 2001, which was the first legal form site to offer automated legal forms directly to the public. And I can tell you, we had lots of pushback at that time from the organized bar. We had battles with the organized bar that went on for years. And even today, that we had pushback from the organized bar, even as late as last year on our legal form sites, saying that this is the unauthorized practice of law, where in my view, it's just software. It's copyright, so it's subject to copyright. It's not a relationship of trust between a person and a lawyer. It's a software, and we always put the appropriate disclaimers on it.
One of the things I want to point out is it touches on a couple of themes that still come up with lawyers. One is that they expect it to just be a quick fix, to be magic.
That's exactly right. They expect a quick fix. That's right. Exactly right.
And then whatever the technology is, it could be, document automation with the forms that you did back in, 2009 with direct law. That they expect it to also do the marketing and also do everything else, and
Right.
essentially that they just click a button and then they have this amazing business that's just going to be throwing money at them.
Yeah, that's very well said. That's exactly the analysis that I came to. And I've done a lot of different startups over the years. Sometimes they work, sometimes they don't. Uh, I actually think of a startup as a kind of making a movie where you have an idea, you pull together a team. The strength of the team often determines whether it will work or not. You create a product or a service, you launch it, and you revise it. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I'm actually a believer in luck. I'm a poker player. And sometimes you get good cards and sometimes you don't get good cards. But luck is a really a non kind of variable in doing startups. Sometimes they work and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, luck, timing, extremely important.
Timing is critical. Sometimes you ride a crest and you have a headwind, and sometimes you have a tailwind. In my case, because of the way my mind works, I always try to be in what I call uncontested market territory, which is where nobody else was before. A book was written about that around 2005 called Blue Ocean Strategy. You always want to be in the blue ocean because you don't want to be, even today, I see lots of AI startups in law, and they're all competing against each other with a similar kind of concept. And one or two will work. But for me, I always wanted to be in a space that nobody was in before. But that's the highest, riskiest alternative. So in my case, I've had failures and I've had successes. It's gone up and it's gone down. And fortunately, I landed in a place where I'm still in an upswing for a while. But, the services that we now provide through LawMediaLabs directly, I predict that will be completely eroded by AI. If you do searches, which I've done on ChatGPT and Perplexity, and a number of things, and you do a form search, give me a power of attorney, it'll retrieve for you a fillable PDF with the form. In some cases, you'll get some disclaimers, but in many cases, it's amazing to me how much you can really get in 2 seconds with a search on any of the ChatGPT alternatives. So technology, I predict, is going to probably wipe out this business that I'm in about 3 years. And another prediction would be, I was very active in starting the whole paralegal profession. I had the first paralegal school, the Institute for Paralegal Training. And one of the things that was notable is that we were the first ones to train all of our paralegals in computer skills when the BMPC came out in 1981 and 1982. All paralegal work, in my view, is going to be a large component of it's going to be wiped out by AI, as well as junior associate work in law firms.
I'm going to bite on that because as most people that listen and watch this know that I love to go back to the origin story, and we are going to do that.
Okay.
But you bring up something that is a critical concern right now that I think would be worth talking about a little bit more before we go back.
That's fine.
Which is everyone is worried about the cannibalization of paralegal work, of junior associate work. And, I myself, I had the pleasure of teaching some law students at Suffolk this past semester.
Right.
And, got to meet up with Mark Lordson, old colleague of yours.
Yeah, my good friend.
Yeah. And so there's concern from the students about going out into a world where this technology can take up some of those tasks and skills that they've been trained on. I don't want to ask you so much about whether or not that's a real threat, because I think we both think it is. The question more is about what the alternative is. Like, what is the new way?
Well, I've thought about this a lot. I always say that lawyers need to go up the value curve and be in a space which is not disintermediated. What that usually means is, human relationship. It's all in the relationship. It's work. You're not going to get a AI bot arguing a case in the Supreme Court. All the kind of work that's of higher value still has to be done by people, not by machines. Particularly when you're working on a one-to-one relationship with a client. So the more complex work will still be there and will probably grow. In other words, the organization of the profession just changes. I mean, the people that you're teaching at Suffolk, you're going to give them technological skills as well as the rest of the skills that they get in law school. So their careers will really be enhanced because they'll have some technological literacy and competency. There's no way that the profession is disappearing. It's just that it's going to be reorganized. And, we saw that even when we started way back and we developed our own software for litigation support. And then when we had widespread automated litigation support, it changed the way in which staffing was done on cases. You just got to think ahead. I always think of myself as living in the future.
Right. I think you have.
And the problem with that is, I get myself in trouble. That's, I get in a lot of trouble. That's that. So I can describe it. But I think curriculum in law schools needs to change. I think all the law students need to be much more technologically literate. I mean, I've had my own share of teaching law and technology in law schools. When I first started doing that, I remember I was doing it at University of Maryland, and this is like part of my origin story. And I got a grant to do, this is 1998, when the web is just getting underway, and I created the People's Law Library in Maryland, which is a major legal information website for the citizens of Maryland, which exists today and gets 1 million views a year. And that concept's not been replicated in every other state. Mostly funded by the Legal Services Corporation. But at the time, I had the largest grant that ever was given to the law school, but the law school faculty thought that the internet was just going to be a fad. So, give me a break. So I quit. And that's when I first started the company. I said, I'm just try it on my own. But you can see the way the resistance to change happens. Change happens slower than you think, and it happens faster than you think. It like catches up with you, and then you're in a different place.
Let's jump back now, because
okay, sure.
I know that you currently live in Florida, right?
I live in Florida, right? I have a couple of staff in Maryland, which is where the company is actually based. But I've been here since 2004. I run the company remotely in 2004, mostly for lifestyle reasons.
And that's amazing. Since 2004, you've been working in a decentralized fashion.
Correct.
Way before it was cool.
Right. That's right.
But were you born in Florida? Where did you grow?
Oh, no. I'm a New Yorker. I'm a Bronx boy.
All right.
But my father was very poor when he grew up on the Lower East Side, and worked very hard, was the first in his family to go to college, and then was in the garment industry. And we lived in the Bronx until I was in 6th grade. And then my father moved the whole family to New Rochelle, New York, in Westchester, in an upper middle class neighborhood. At the time, he was doing very well. And during those early years, it was all about business. My father encouraged me to go to business school at Lehigh, and I had a paper route when I was in 9th grade. It was doing a lot of early entrepreneurial activities. And he had actually encouraged me. Everything was about going into business or making money. So I was in the business school at Lehigh for 2 years, but I wanted to go to law school, and I was already changing. This is a good example of the way a university can be transformative, because I moved from the business school to major in philosophy and American history. And that whole process began, and Lehigh itself, I have to say this, was an all-male school and was pretty conservative at the time. And I do remember my little group invited Norman Thomas, who is the advocate for nationalization of the steel mills, to speak at Lehigh. But Lehigh is in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, which was the home of Bethlehem Steel, and they vetoed that. So we let it out that Lehigh was circumventing free speech. It wasn't good for their reputation at the time. But meanwhile, Lehigh itself was transformative, and then I ended up going to law school. My father at the time was had started a small over-the-counter brokerage firm named for myself and my brother, Richard Bruce and Company. And his dream was for me to become a Wall Street lawyer. And I did work at the brokerage firm. I was on the trading desk when I was 16 years old, and I worked in his brokerage firm. So I got that whole activity. This was part of my DNA, this entrepreneurial business activity. But of course, I ended up graduating from Columbia and working at the poverty program, the Office of Economic Opportunity, in 1965.
From Columbia Law School.
Right out of Columbia. It was right after COFO's summer in 1964. In 1964, I had started an organization called, you ever hear this one? Law Student Civil Rights Research Council. You ever hear that one? Lasted for 30 years after we started it. All 9 major law schools, all the Ivy League law schools, started chapters where we could recruit students to work with civil rights attorneys from the South during Freedom Summer. I was the co-founder of that with another guy, and we raised money from foundations to support the law students during the summer. And we ran the whole operation out of the ACLU in Manhattan. So that was a completely transformative experience. It really basically radicalized me because I'm a child of the 60s. What can I say? And that experience connected me with Edgar and Jean Kahn. Are you familiar with the Kahns? You know Edgar Kahn, no?
No.
Okay. So Edgar and Jean Kahn, Yale law students, and they start the first neighborhood law firm in New Haven, Connecticut, and write a seminal article called The Civilian Perspective or something like that, which was the foundation for the nation's legal services program. Kahn then becomes the speechwriter for Sergeant Shriver and becomes the intellectual architect for legal services. And because of my work with the Law Students Council, I connected with Kahn. And he gets me a job in the general counsel's office, one of 2 people at OEO. And then my first job, basically, is counsel to Clinton Bamberger, who was the first director of legal services. So I'm sitting at the center of the whole creation of the legal services program. So that was really exciting. I'm only like 26 years old. And that oriented me to this lifelong concept of access to law, that we can't have a viable legal system unless people can access the legal system.
So let's pause for a moment there. I mean, first off, that is an amazing constellation of people to be a part of at that point.
Yeah, it was very exciting for me, actually.
Yeah, and also greatly appreciate your support and involvement with the civil rights movement and all of that effort to help people. And I guess I just want to step back from that and just say, like, how did you get to that moment? There's many different directions you could have gone in. Like your father, greatly was impressing upon you a business mindset, which you have. His, it seems like his push was more towards a traditional business mindset within Wall Street and maybe Goldman Sachs, like that kind of.
Right. That's right. Right.
But you went in a different direction. Like you ended up changing, the major for philosophy. And by the way, I'm also a philosophy major from Yale.
Right.
And so I definitely connect with that experience because I didn't start that way either. I agree with you about the transformative potential for university and higher education. So what brought you in that direction where you ended up?
Well, I think in my second year, I was clerking at Columbia Law School for Marvin Frankel, who became a very famous federal judge. And Professor Frankel took me under his wing. And I came up with, he was very interested. He was also the advisor for the Law Students Civil Rights Research Council chapter at Columbia and was very progressive. And he was interested in other ways of serving the broad middle class with legal services. So I researched an article for him called Experiments in Delivery of Legal Services, which you still can find in the ABA Journal where it was published. And I went out and I looked at a lot of foreign experiences, the civilian advice bureau in England and other experiences worldwide. And we put all this information into this article. And it opened my own eyes. And, the way my mind worked, I was always I didn't know it at the time, interested in this blue market experience. I saw all these activities in other countries which were enabling people to access the legal system. So that at that time began to click with me. It didn't really reach full expression until later in life, because I had some detours in my career after I left OEL. I actually went away from the law for about 10 years, but that's kind of another story. Very early, I had this idea that the legal system has to really work for everybody. And we're still far behind. We're still far behind. And because we had some major wars with the organized bar when we established the legal service profession. So I viewed the organized bar, even though I was very active in the ABA in later years, as an obstacle to progress. They were the enemy. They were the ones who were preventing the monopoly of the legal profession, the way it was controlled and organized, constrained innovation and constrain the ability. And this is going to be true today. We're still going through the same cycles with the organized bar as both an opportunity and also a problem. But we have a younger generation today. I mean, that's a real plus, I think, because you have the generation that's moving to the legal profession now are what I call digital natives. So that's very different, obviously, than when I first got started. But it was doing that article for Frankel and then moving into the Office of Economic Opportunity and being part of starting legal services had an impact on me for the rest of my career. And it's still today. It's still what I do today. It's still what I'm committed to doing today. It's my most important thing that I think about is access to the legal system and ways of doing it. And all the startups I'm involved in, fedarb.com, which I helped start. You can look it up. Fedarb.com is an alternative way of doing disputes. It was started by another federal judge who I knew, Abraham Sophia. And One Digital Trust is an estate planning solution, a non-lawyer's estate planning solution. So, I mean, we now have a proliferate, we have many, many companies now on the net who are offering different kinds of services. When we started, there was nobody. But I'm optimistic that these barriers to innovation will continue to drop away. And it's a very different environment than when I first started.
So along the way, there were a number of companies that you started, a lot of different ways of bringing the innovation that you were comfortable with to the market, including,
right.
direct law, including
Right.
mylawyer.com.
Right.
When 2000 came about and the internet was exploding at that point, and there were so many different companies, there was also the downturn when Wall Street kind of
The bust. Yeah.
I guess if we take from that point, like what was your mindset then? What were you thinking about the prospects of? Because it seems like it'd be a little bit counterintuitive that things would keep going at that point. Like maybe it was a fad.
There was a lot of things going on around 2000, 2001. We had what we called the dot-com bust. Now, I connected with a company in England called Epoch, which developed this document automation technology called Rapidox. And they were doing the same thing in the UK that I was trying to do in the US. The irony, of course, the UK was much more advanced and open to innovation. And I also connected with Richard Susskind at the time. And he actually, I went over there and we had a chat. So there was a lot of intellectual thought processes about these innovations when they would happen. And so I merged my initial company with Epoch in the UK because they were going to do an IPO. They were going to take it public. And then the market crashed. We had a dot-com bust. So they couldn't get the IPO off. They just got a private placement off. So I had about $1 million, which was a lot of money at the time, to put together a staff in the US to automate hundreds of forms with their technology. And then we entered into a contract with the largest prepaid legal insurer in the United States called ROG to provide these forms to all of their clients, all of their customers. So all that was actually going well. But with the dot-com bust, nobody could get any other venture money. So there was a dry land. It was like a desert. Nobody could get any funding. And EPOC kind of ran out of money, and they couldn't get another placement. So I bought the company back and stripped it down. And we had enough revenue coming in to continue to succeed. And so I ran it, and it continued to provide a healthy income. Arag was generating for us at the time more than $1 million in revenue, which was a lot in 2002. But there wasn't a lot going on because nobody was funding legal startups. I can't believe how much funding is now going into legal startups since, let's say, 2012. At the time, it was a total desert. So you just had to kind of push your way through. I'm a big believer in not quitting. So it stayed in place and it thrived, and we got through it. But at the time, there was not much going on because nobody could get funding after the dot-com bust for at least a 5-6 year periods more, almost a 10-year period. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
But a follow-up question I'd like to ask you is about that. That you're a big proponent of not quitting.
Right.
Where does that come from?
My father. My father.
How did he?
My father says, "Granats, don't quit." It's in our DNA. My son we pass it down to my son. It's straight out of the streets of New York. You don't quit.
Keep going.
Yeah. Sometimes it's not the wisest advice. Sometimes it's time to fold them when it's not working out, because often in the startup world, they often don't work out. So you need to fold them so you can come back another day. But generally, I stayed in there and figured out another strategy. So what happened, we had a legal forms business that was very healthy. And all of our revenue was coming in from on the consumer side, from click-throughs from Google. So Google changed its algorithm. So our revenue from the legal forms business went down like 50% in a 60-day period. And then we had a problem with ROG. It was very successful. We had the contract for 10 years. They decided to bring it in-house because they didn't want to pay us, a couple of $1 million a year. They decided to automate it in-house. So I lost all this revenue. So that's why I started Direct Law. I started Direct Law in response to other things that were happening in our marketplace, in our market space. But change is happening all the time. The people that I sold Direct Law to recently, and I sold off the automated legal forms business. And the last report that I got only like 30 days ago, because Google is now presenting text on the top above the links. People are not clicking on the links to go through to get the content that they wanted. So there's major change going on now. I'm sure it's happening in other retail business as well. That the AI algorithm has changed the way in which people get to websites. I'm sure it's not only our industry, but everybody's going to have to figure out a way to adapt to the way search is going to happen in the future. Whereas before, a big chunk of our business was coming right out of our business. Because we were early, we had great Google positioning. If you put in like power of attorney in Maryland, we'd come up on top. So the changes, I'm glad that I don't have to live through those changes. Although I did say that I think my existing business is going to go away in about 3 or 4 or 5 years, but I'm not really concerned about that because I made enough out of it that I don't really need to run the business anymore.
Which part is going to go away?
Well, we have I still have a smart legal forms business that's being distributed by a major partner that we have that just pays us a royalty. And all those forms appear in Office Max and Office Depot and Federal Express offers. It's all that content we get a royalty on. And I think that those are flat forms. They're Adobe fillable forms, but they come in a package with lots of detailed instructions. I think that product will be displaced by AI as AI becomes more robust. You'll get not only the form back, but you'll get instructions on how to fill it out. I think. I mean, it's hard to predict. I mean, I hope it doesn't. I mean, this business has been going on for me this portion of the business has been going on for about 8 years. And I was surprised in the last quarter that our revenue was pretty much the same. And it hasn't really declined. I'm waiting for the other shoe to drop. Being, a person who's seen a lot of shoes drop.
Definitely. One question I have about the different businesses that you've had is my impression from the outside, and correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of these businesses seem to be, like that you're running them, like there's not a big team.
Correct. Small team.
Small team. And I'm just wondering how you approach that. Okay, the alternative is the traditional that we all hear about every single day, where some company starts up, they go out there, they try to raise VC, they get like $1 gajillion worth of VC, and then they, sometimes go bust in a few years because they can't read the kind of timeline or multiples that the investors are looking for. Why it doesn't seem like you've pursued that route, and was that?
Yeah, there are a couple of answers to that, I think.
Yeah.
The first one is personal. I wasn't diagnosed with ADHD until I was 50 years old, but I had like a short attention span. So I had a lot of curiosity about things, and I like to move on like to the next one. For me, doing a startup in its early stages is very exciting, but you need other skills to grow it beyond that. Like Jack Newton is a superb executive, the way he's grown Clio. I don't have those kind of skill sets, and I was never really interested in that. There's another part that I was always interested. You mentioned this before, what I call work-life balance. That I wanted to have more control over my work life. I didn't want it necessarily to be captured by the VC who I then had to report to, or it was a different style. I wanted to make sure that I could maintain a work-life balance. I ended up with 4 children, 8 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren. And to me, that's still, and a wife that I've been married to for 64 years. Whereas many of the people that I graduated high school with, they all got divorced. So there was another part of me that was personal that suggested that I wanted to maintain a degree of control around these other concepts that are ingrained in my DNA. Make money while you sleep. This blue ocean concept, so you don't have a lot of competition. Build a small team. It's like making a movie. Movies get made by small teams, even though there are a lot of people that bring a team together. Movie's done, team dissipates. In my case, I ended up selling off the properties that I had and kind of moved on to the next one. I don't know, is that a satisfying answer for you? I'm not sure it is.
No, it is. All of your answers are fantastic. And the reason why I asked you actually is a bit personal. Like when I hear your story and the things that you've done and the choices that you've made were pretty similar, like in a way, like to what I, like, and a lot of it has been inspired by seeing your work and, that my team is a small team. I haven't gone out for VC. Like I do go from, one interest to another. I do spend time on it. So
very, very, very sensitive to this cash flow, basically. You want to run an enterprise. I was never into, my partners in Epoch raised a lot of money, but they weren't really sensitive to, they were running losses. A lot of startups run losses until they make it. Sometimes they don't make it. But I was more oriented to the idea of creating a product in 6 months. I want to get positive cash flow. It's got to work.
Absolutely. It needs
Yeah,
to
so
be.
it's definitely a different environment, but it's really driven by my own desire to balance my work with family. My wife wanted to have 6 children. I only wanted 2. We settled on 4. so, so
Good
even,
compromise.
but I worked very hard, but I was very lucky to have a good life partner.
Yeah, that's
It's like the best part of me is my life partner.
fantastic. You've also had an amazing effect on the profession, and I'd like to ask you a few questions about that because
Sure.
things are changing, and with the time we have, I'd like to get your view on kind of like the long view of where you think is it just going to redefine like the job description that we've had to date? Is it going
Yeah.
to put us out of business? Is it going to maybe fracture the traditional view of a lawyer into many different specialties? What are your thoughts about how this transformation is going to affect the legal profession?
I think the core of the legal profession, litigation, appellate advocacy of all kinds, high level negotiations will always remain in place. Our country is really based on a vibrant and independent, thriving legal profession. I don't think that's going to change. I think the way in which certain tasks are done will get changed. It will be automated or um, make it easier in some cases. Legal research tasks become easier, but the core ideas that people need to be represented is going to remain in place. I don't see that changing. And the ABA as an institution will evolve. I was always active in the standing committee on the delivery of legal services, which had a special focus on helping small law firms serve moderate income individuals, which is what I was doing with mylawyer.com. We didn't really discuss too much. But mylawyer.com, I started in about 2003, which had all the features that eventually ended up in direct law. It was a Maryland-based law firm that served people who had family law matters. So in my own case, I had an expertise in family law. And even though I was automated, I would talk to people on the phone. Everybody always had an opportunity to talk to me, and that was very gratifying. And I don't see that being automated. People had more complex issues, and I give them legal advice. I think that legal advice function can be disintermediated somewhat, but not totally. I mean, maybe I'm underestimating. You know what I'm talking about. In other words, I've asked ChatGPT some more complex issues, and I've been surprised about the response, even though it's complex. But I think we have a long way to go. I think these 5 years, 10 years before we'll see some real change. But I think the core commitment of the legal profession will stay intact. It's got to stay intact.
And one thing I want to point out to everyone is I believe that you had these different like business
Yeah.
interests going at the same time that you were still practicing law, right?
Right. I was always a member of the Maryland Bar. And I had a project at the University of Maryland Law School where I was supervising law students giving legal advice in the courthouses on family law matters, which is how I ended up starting MD Family Lawyer. So throughout this 30-year period, I had a little subspecialty in family law in Maryland, which I felt as I wanted to do it. I mean, even though I automated the whole thing with MD Family Lawyer, this month I transferred it over to a colleague. And I stopped doing it. But you can go to it's MD Family Lawyer, and it's a good example of a client-facing law firm in a specialty that's totally automated. So your viewers might be interested in that. And it's actually built on the direct law platform. And so we have a couple of hundred firms that are still using it. So I sold off direct law, but I still retain the use of its platform and actually pay a regular hosting fee like any other lawyer client of direct law. I found a satisfaction in that kind of work, but it was unusual for me because I did find I never wanted to work in a large firm. And typically, every time I worked for somebody else, I would crash and burn generally. I mean, since my early days working for the government and so forth, I've always run my own show. But that's a curse, It's a curse and a blessing, depending on how you look at it. It worked for me.
Yeah.
It worked for me, but there were times when it didn't work so well.
Did you find that one line of work informed the other, like
Yes.
continuing to practice law along
Yeah.
with the online stuff?
Definitely. Yeah, I basically, yes, because I was using my own platform. That's why I did it. I wanted to eat my own stuff, so to speak. It was important for me to, and I do have to tell you, I obviously I knew the platform because I created it, but I wanted to use it in real time so I could get insights about how to change it and feed that back into the direct law team so they could change the platform. But lawyers themselves were challenged. I was surprised because we thought we made it as easy as possible to use. But that generation of lawyers was not as digital literate as the current generation coming out.
And one thing I want to touch on is the LawMediaLabs. So that's an incubator, and it's a way that.
Well, it's an incubator. It's a holding company. It holds it gets the royalties from the legal forms business, and then I use some of that to invest in other startups. And so I have an interest in about 3 or 4 different startups.
So it's a way that you've been able to like pay forward.
Correct.
Not only literally, but to support others, but to actually share your wisdom that you've got.
That's right. Yeah, that's very satisfying, actually, to work with a younger generation, which is now coming up, which is just the younger generation is fantastic. The stuff that I see coming up, just amazing to me. To compare it, it's only like a 25-year period. If you go from 2025 back to 2000, it's 25 years. There's been it's hard to describe the change that's happened and the receptivity of venture capital to invest in the legal vertical market. Now, a lot of that money is going into applications for large law firms, which I think is, they don't like to invest in consumer-oriented legal startups. Some do. But there's the bulk of the money is still going to support large law firms. But so I'm not really interested in that because the large law firms are defending large corporations against the little guy who can't get access to the legal system. So I'm not really interested in that at all. But all the really a lot of the important technological work is being done for applications for large law firms. So the companies that would serve lawyers or consumers directly is still underfunded. It's a stretch.
And you've always been an advocate for supporting the little guy, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's been my total focus, really.
Yeah. Can you give one example out of LawMediaLabs of a project that you've been working with or on that you are excited about?
OneDigitalTrust.com. It's an estate planning site started by 2 Indian entrepreneurs who were working for large consulting firms, and they saw a need, and it's thriving. It's been in business about 5 years. It's One Digital Trust. It's worth taking a look at. They've done a lot of really good work. The other one that I was involved in was Bridge.us, which was an immigration processing firm for consumers that was just acquired by a larger one. So there is a lot of activity still, going on in the space. I mean, it's kind of amazes me. Sometimes every time I turn around, there's a confusion between a company that is a real company and just a one product organization. It's not really a company. Companies have to have their own biological energy to grow over time. And the way that I think about it is, if I put all my companies together, it's really like almost one company. They're just different projects. Direct Law is a project. Smart Legal Forms is a project. MyLawyer.com was a project. But I was CEO of all of them. So if I put them all together, that's really the all-embracing company. So
that makes a lot of sense. Well, Let me ask you a couple of questions that I ask all of my guests.
Okay.
Uh, the first is, and I think that you have a lot to offer in terms of like some insight into this for myself and for others that are part of our audience. Is just how do you do it? Like what you've described is a lifetime of
Yeah.
juggling all of these different interests and your family. And so how do you put that together?
Well, first of all, it's hard. Yeah, I still had to work hard. And I was lucky in my relationship with my wife, Nancy. She helped me manage all this. I couldn't do it by myself. And it was important to me to have this work life balance. I mean, if you talk to her, she would, my kids, they would say, oh, I was working all the time, but I still tried to prioritize that. I mean, work is work, but life is life. And I feel proud of the fact that I've stayed committed to this idea of access to the legal system. That's the work part. But there's another part, which is at the end of the day, which I have as family. So I made that a core priority. And sometimes, the binds would almost break. There were some tough times for us. It's not easy. You can't quit. That's the other thing.
With everything that you've done and everything
Yeah.
that you're doing, for you, what makes it worthwhile?
Oh, well, on the work side, it makes it worthwhile where people can get their problems solved. I got a lot of satisfaction out of running MD Family Lawyer and seeing people, get through their divorce without spending thousands of dollars in legal fees. We had a mediation component. So if they had one issue that was separating them from getting a non-contested divorce, we would mediate out the one issue. And they saved, $20,000 in legal fees and get on with their lives. So that whole thing has been very satisfying to me. And it's a dimension of access to the legal system. Things have gotten better. So that's really worthwhile. And at the end of the day, I moved up from another place in Florida to be near my oldest daughter and my 4 granddaughters and 7 great grandchildren who live 5 minutes from it. So that's very satisfying too. To me, that's what it's about.
That's amazing. And I want to thank you personally for everything that you've done for the legal profession. You've moved us forward for good.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I also have a lot of respect for the work that you're doing. I'm a big follower of you.
Thank you, Richard. For people that are watching and listening, how could they keep in touch with you?
You can go to my website, richardgranat.com. There's contact information on it. It's my name.
Fantastic. And to all of you watching and listening out there, see you next week. Thank you so much for watching the latest episode of the LawDroid Manifesto podcast. To keep in the loop about upcoming episodes, please subscribe to LawDroid Manifesto and you'll get notified. Thanks for watching. See you next time.